The Joestars, one of the most influential families in anime and manga history, spanning a history of almost 40 years, which is insane to think about. Their influence and popularity is very well known. And how could it not when you have a cast of characters this broad and this unique, but still connected, is honestly a recipe for success. You got your gentleman type, you got your funny type, you got your stoic and edgy type, the goofy kid type, the big dreamer type, the stoic, independent, badass woman type, the dark one, and the mysterious one. And for a very long time, this has been the standard. There is a wide variety to pick from here, all with a unique setting and a unique outlook on life and an interesting story to follow. However, up until recently, that's kind of changed. For a very long time before JoJo's blew up in the West, there has only ever been 8 parts. However, now we have 9. The JoJo Lands introduces 2 new Joestars for us to follow, Jodio Joestar and Dragona Joestar. And I know people are already going to be complaining about it in the comments. I know Dragona does not have the JoJo moniker in her name, but if you read the actual manga and actually pass the reading comprehension test it requires to look at these 2 characters, you realize they come as a package deal. Anyway, moving on. And unlike their previous 2 predecessors, Johnny and Gappy, they are highly complex and extremely deep individuals at the beginning of their story rather than later in their story. And if you understand Araki's tendencies and habits while writing characters over the past nearly 40 years, you realize they're going to go into some pretty interesting places that no Joestar has ever gone before, leading me to believe that these 2 will be no ordinary Joestars. In fact, they'll be pretty extraordinary Joestars, at least in my opinion. Oh yeah, and also, hello, my name is Metas. Walk with me. But before we jump into the deep end, who are these 2? I think that's a good question to ask for anybody who doesn't know right now, and a way to express my feelings about them. Starting off with the main Joestar here, Jodio. Unlike his predecessors, Jodio is outright confirmed to have problems, and I mean like serious problems. It's been theorized and speculated a lot that some Joestars might have some mental illnesses because of trauma or for other reasons, but in Jodio's case, it's outright stated by the narrator that Jodio has antisocial personality disorder. And looking at his naming scheme, that totally makes sense. At some points, Jodio can act overly caring, having a lot of friends, being extremely charismatic, character traits that are very common with the Joestars. However, if you look at the Dio part of his name, yeah, you can see why he kind of crashes out and might have a disorder, as he is kind of named after Dio and Diego, which I will talk later about in the video, as it will probably play a major factor moving on forward with this character in the future. However, in the present, it just kind of shows a major conflict of his character. What I mean by that is, at times he can be super caring and wants to protect people. However, in that protection, he possibly takes it a bit too far, and in my opinion, kind of borders on anti-hero slash villain-like tendencies. The greatest examples of this being is when Dragona got SA'd and then proceeded to burn down a school bus in order to get revenge for her, and then does organized crime to protect his mother. So like, the right idea, but wrong execution. At least morally speaking. Now, in my opinion, I find this highly fascinating. I love the conflict of the character going on here, how he wants to be helpful, but he does it in the completely wrong way, and there are consequences to those actions. As a reader, I am totally invested to see where he goes. To be completely honest, Jodio is the main reason why I come back month after month to read this manga, because he's not like the other Joestars. He's completely written in a way that is kind of anti-Joestar in a way. And for some people, that's a massive turnoff. However, they're not wrong. Follow with me here. Araki made a book called Manga Theory and Practice, where he states in the first few chapters how to make a protagonist and how it's basically just like you have to make them relatable and interesting to follow. And in the case of Jodio, he completely contradicts himself. Jodio is not comfortable to follow. He's not your Jotaro or your Jonathan or your Son Goku or your Naruto. He is, to be honest, anti-shonen. And while yes, technically the current version of the JoJo manga is a seinen, it still has a lot of shonen elements in it. But in this specific case, it's really heavily in that seinen area when it comes to Jodio and his character. So when you're looking at Jodio as a character, you can clearly tell he's not like his predecessors. He's actually kind of almost going in the wrong direction. And where that potentially leads him in the future is, in my opinion, overall the most interesting part about him. Now, moving further down the road, let's talk about his brother, sister, something in between, Dragona. And I'm already guessing, you can already tell just by that alone, yeah, they're not ordinary in the slightest. And I'm going to be clearly dodging landmines during this entire section. So to rip off the band-aid immediately, Dragona is an allegory for a lot of things. Primarily, the biggest one is a representation for the trans community. Now, for everybody who's gonna start barking at me because I'm wrong, no, follow with me here. Araki has always been in the know and has always been pretty hyper-progressive for the most part. He has been influenced by gay artists and has outright stated in many interviews to have gay canonical characters within the franchise. So nobody should be really shocked if Dragona comes out to be, at least at bare minimum, cross-dressing really hard and or is trans. To be honest, it's kind of overdue due to the fact that the guy has been influenced by these people for years and might be a hit piece against Shonen Jump, but I will explain that later. Anyway, I don't think it's going to be the primary focus of their character. I think Araki knows that as a writer at his age, that making that the focal point is kind of dumb, and I think where a lot of media fucks up at when they try to force it. And in this case, I don't think Araki is trying to force it. As of right now, in his mind and in the overall story, it's just a minor thing. However, the major thing about them is trauma, at least for now. Like I mentioned earlier, Dragona was SA'd and had to deal with that. And overall, I think they dealt with it pretty well during their backstory. And the character that comes with it is a very maternal figure explaining to Jodio while he loved what he did for him, he kind of did push it a little bit too far. So almost in a way, Dragona's kind of this stopping point, or this kind of like owner that pulls the leash back on Jodio when he's going a bit too crazy. And for a lot of people, they really like that. They really like this maternal figure that is present for Jodio, or at least this older sibling that is present for Jodio to kind of rein him back in. Now, that mostly comes from Twitter. I don't know about the YouTube comment section, but at least for Twitter users, a lot of them do like that about her character. Now, I will be honest, as of right now, she doesn't have a lot of character development other than that backstory and a few minor interactions with Jodio and crew. However, after I go into this history point, I think I know where the character is going to end up going, and I won't lie, I might be more interested in her than Jodio. So overall, looking at the characters now, it is clearly poignant either through character or just how they're made as a character are clearly showing signs of just not being anything that Araki has ever written or drawn before. And with that being said, I am fully invested. I want to know where both of these characters end up going, as they possibly could go down a dark path, a path in the middle, or a light path, a Brando path, a JoJo path. Who knows? The possibilities are just, they just get me invested, man. I love it. And I think I know where it's possibly going to go. As I've been hinting throughout the entire video, there is a bit of IRL history that is needed here. And plot twist, this is a two-parter video. Welcome to the second part, boys. So the context here being is, at the end of my video discussing about the origins of Original Golden Wind, I had come to the epiphany that Jodio and Dragona are kind of Araki's answer to the question of what female Giorno would have been. For anybody confused on that, go watch that video. It's actually really good. I really like the subject and how I kind of presented it in that video. But to give a short TLDR, basically, Araki wanted to make a really dark female protagonist, but couldn't because of his mental state and Shonen Jump interfering during his creative process. And he was extremely drained of making manga at that time. However, now it's almost been nearly 30 years since Golden Wind debuted, and that's actually genuinely wild saying, but it has been that long. And the current place Araki is at is much better than Shonen Jump. Ultra Jump allows Araki to do anything he kind of wants at this point, and darker, much more mature stories being one of them. As Araki knows his audience has matured, so he's making more matured stories for them. And looking at the two previous parts, Steel Ball Run and Jojoian, yeah, it's pretty clear. And the trend of these two parts, or the trend of just the Steel Ball Run universe in general, is to kind of look at past ideas and kind of freshen them up a bit with all your creative writing writing process is now. Speaking for Araki here. Now, for anybody that doesn't believe me, just look at Steel Ball Run and Jojo. Steel Ball Run being a parallel to parts 1, 2, and 3. Just look at the characters present. Josuke and Josuke, for God's sakes. It's a mystery manga too. There's a lot of overlapping parallels. I'm not gonna lay it all out for you. I think you know personally as well as I do. So it's just like, yeah, of course Araki's going to go back and look at part 5 and the things he didn't do and apply them to part 9 JoJo Lands. One of the major ones being is the failed idea of female Giorno and just the overall darker tone he wanted to put in that story. And just looking at the tone of the story now in JoJo Lands, yeah, I'm gonna be real, a lot of the backstory stuff and just the actions the characters are taking are much darker than previous parts. So a major box is checked here. But what about Dragona and Jodio now with that added context? Well, in my opinion, I love them a lot more. Starting off with Dragona first, because I feel like it's the most physically seen feature here, is Dragona is at bare minimum really androgynous and or extremely feminine. Looking back at female Giorno, well, that was the entire point. Even looking at regular Giorno, at least concurrently, Giorno is supposed to feel pretty androgynous to begin with. So Dragona is quite literally representing physically what Giorno was and is and could have been, which I like to call back a lot. Now, in terms of her character, I shockingly might have an answer and where it could potentially go in the future, as I think she actually has a little bit of Jolene in her, at least the caring and motherly side that was shown in part 6. However, we can take it a bit further. If Araki is pulling from Jolene a little bit here, there has been some choice comments she has made in the past about her sexuality, ? And if we technically look at Anasui and how he/she changed all of a sudden thanks to the editorial team, probably, and how they were supposed to be a thing but couldn't for said reasons. I think Araki is combining all these ideas to kind of make a statement piece. Just because they are said things doesn't mean it will flop or something. It's kind of like a middle finger to the entire industry, kind of, at least in an extremely subtle way. And looking at it, it is clearly working, and people are much more invested in this character than the past ones. Now, that is just speculation, but I think it's there, but we'll have to see in the future. Overall, with Dragona, she quite literally is no ordinary Joestar. She is so unique due to the factors that make up her being. I think she will lead into some pretty great character areas that I think a lot of people are going to enjoy, that I am going to enjoy. And the fact that she's not a JoJo might end up actually making her much more interesting in the future, because she'll possibly go down character routes that we've never seen, because sometimes with a lot of these Joestars, they are a bit formulaic. So overall, I'm excited to see where she goes. So we finally enter my problem child. So if Dragona physically represents what Giorno was in the past, and we'll see where her character goes in the future in interesting directions, what about Jodio? Well, I think he's going to be a little bit gray, to the point where I don't think there will ever be an established black or white, at least metaphorically speaking. Giorno represented Jonathan and Dio, and in my personal opinion, I think Giorno really kind of hard-specced into Jonathan a lot, and we really didn't get to see that Dio side. However, with Jodio, I think he represents Johnny and Diego, and what's been currently shown through his character, he's really showing a lot of his grandfather's aspects through his motivations and his actions. He's power and money hungry like Diego, but is also trying to do the right thing like Johnny, even though he was a bit of an asshole. Then you turn it all on its head by giving Jodio some mental problems, and now it's just a massive confusing mess to see where this kid ends up. And since original Golden Wind was supposed to be darker, I'm highly speculating here that we will end up seeing Jodio do some highly questionable things that originally were supposed to be for good, but ends up kind of doing the wrong decision time and time again, even though they were well meant. So don't be shocked when we see more bus incidences happen again. To be honest, the fact that I'm even kind of saying this within this video kind of proves that point, that he's not going to be like his predecessors before him. To be quite literal, I think he's going to be in his own league. Like, he is far and above probably going to be one of the more complex Joestars I think we've ever seen. A zenith of Araki's writing. Now, taking a step back and looking at everything as a whole now, I think I'm appreciating it a lot more, as I can clearly tell Araki's he's taking a lot more care and is putting a lot more thought into his creative process here, and is trying to at least go back to old ideas and kind of present them here again, however, in a much more adult style, showing his wisdom and his creativity at 60 plus years old, kind of presenting the idea that while you might have a good idea, sometimes it takes a few years to actually get the execution down the way you want it. Sometimes it's for a while, several decades in fact. So it's a learning lesson for all of us. While these two are descended from Joestars and are made from past ideas, they are clearly on their own and are completely original in where they're going. So with that all being said, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, stay hydrated, and I'll see you in the next one, ladies and gentlemen. Deuces.